So thank you again for coming, and please give a warm welcome to Jerry Mead.
So at a certain point, I needed to decide whether I wore my regular glasses, my bifocals, or if all of you are going to be fuzzy and I can see my notes better, I'll wear these. So I'm going with option 2. So first of all, yes, thank you for coming. It's been with the parking outside and the rain between the two. It's about as grim outside as some of Cindy Sherman's photographs. So thank you, John, first of all, for the opportunity to do this. I'm going to read you the email I got from John that he sent out asking people to do these talks. An artist, you can talk about an artist whose work you have seen for a while, loved and admired, someone who has inspired you, someone whose work is always of interest to you. Well, in terms of Cindy Sherman, she fits all of those categories and more for me. I've seen and admired her work for over 30 years. I have collected it for about 25 years. And I've been fortunate to have organized 3 survey exhibitions of her work, one for the Burchfield Penney Art Center, one for the Castellani Art Museum, and one at Buffalo State College. I've also included her work in a number, as John mentioned, of collections of my collection that have been shown throughout Western New York and Eastern Pennsylvania. When he asked me about doing an artist or suggested one, it wasn't so much that I wanted to do Cindy Sherman, I felt like I had to do Cindy Sherman. She hadn't been represented in the series, and I thought, as John's mentioned, because of her esteem and importance to the area. So in terms of John also asked for a short statement about the talk. Now, just to make sure that I do what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to give a paragraph. To the world, Cindy Sherman is a universally celebrated photographer who was a seminal figure in the contemporary art world, who made a career of making chameleonic quote-unquote self-portraits. To us, she is all that, but we know her as Cindy, the Buff State student who helped found Hallwalls and went on to become famous, really famous. She is our art community's equivalent of hometown icons like Lucille Ball, Tim Russert, and Jim Kelly. My talk, from the perspective of a curator and a collector, will briefly survey numerous series of her work spanning 5 decades and draw attention to her photographs in public and private collections in the region. So I'll start off with some basic biographical information about her. I know way too much about Cindy Sherman right now at this point. I know about the Botox, I know about her neck being done, I know who she dated, I know where she lived, I know who she bought her house from. It's a little too much, but I've pared it down to what I hope is going to be interesting. Why I think it's important to look at Cindy's work and to talk about it is to see the long arc and the curve of her entire career. That allows you to see examples where you can see intersections, where ideas began, germinated, were continued, developed upon, and she returned back to ideas. And I'm sure certainly it exposed you to some work that maybe you're not familiar with. So in terms of some of her biography, she was born Cynthia Morris Sherman on January 19th, 1954 in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, the youngest of 5 children. She moved to Huntington, Long Island after she was born. Her father was an engineer with Grumman Aircraft, and her mother taught reading to children with learning disabilities. In 1972, she came to Buffalo State College to study art. She started out first as a painting major, but she changed that to photography. And I'm going to use in my talk a number of quotes and things that Cindy has said or been asked in interview about her own work. So this is Cindy, quote, "There was nothing more to say to a painting. I was meticulously copying other art, and then I realized I could just use a camera and put my time into an idea instead." So to correct the record, it's often thought that Cindy Sherman graduated from Buffalo State College. She didn't graduate. She was a few credits shy, and so she doesn't actually have her degree from Buffalo State. At a certain point, while Tony Bennett was the director of the Burchfield, he explored giving her an honorary doctorate, and she passed on that. She's very shy, and that would have entailed her to actually give the commencement address, so that never happened. What did happen, though, was that in 2012, she was given an honorary doctorate of fine arts from FIT, and also that same year, she got an honorary doctorate from the Royal College of Art in London. So I'll refrain from referring to her as Dr. Sherman through the entire talk, but she is technically a doctor twice over now.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay. Okay, So these is broken down into bodies of her work. I mean, you're probably all familiar with the Untitled film stills, but there's a body of work and works that she did that preceded that were documented extensively in a catalog raisonné. The first of those is the face transformation. This is a series that Cindy considered to be her first, quote, first serious work. It relates to the classroom assignment that she had at Buff State to develop a photographic series suggesting the passage of time. Robert Longo, as it's been mentioned, his friend, encouraged her to show herself in the customary ritual of putting on makeup. Originally, these were presented as an accordion fold. The one on the right was included in the Albright-Knox Western New York exhibition in 1975, and it was the first work that she exhibited in a museum. So that would have been when she was in her junior year at Buffalo State. These were shown, there's two examples I'm showing here, but they were shown in an exhibition at SEPA Gallery in '75 called Five Photographers. And you can see how she's transformed herself. What you see is a screen behind that makes it look like it's kind of from a photo booth, and you can see the upper left and all the way down to the other one. She's also hand-tinted the ones to make them look a bit more glamorous. So these are referred to as Untitled A through E. This comes from the Face Transformation series, and what you're seeing here is one from each of those progressive series of photographs that showed her transforming from one character to another. And you'll see some of these show up because they were reprinted later and they're in public collections now. They were printed in editions of 10 in 1985. The next group of work is referred to as now her work is all untitled, but for ease of being able to identify work, there are titles or names that are added to them in parentheses where they're referred to something, right? So these were referred to as the cutouts. She's now progressed from doing the face to the entire body. So what you're seeing here are photographs that she's taken of herself and then cut them out in kind of a paper doll fashion. Here's a quote from Cindy. One of the reasons I started photographing myself was that supposedly in the spring, one of the teachers at Buffalo State would take the class out to a place near Buffalo where there were waterfalls, and everyone romps around without clothes and takes pictures of each other. I thought, oh, I don't want to do that. But if I'm going to have to do that and go into the woods, I better deal with it early. Luckily, we never had to do that, unquote. I don't know who that was, I'm not sure what teacher. What she started to do with these is on the upper left there, you see what is called doll clothes. And what she did is she was cut it of herself, and she made this little book with plastic sleeves that had the clothing. And it was a 3-minute animated film, where basically it was kind of a stop-action film that she did. So, having made these cutouts of the different characters that she needed to do in different, because the figure that you see up there was moving and putting on the clothes and moving around, etc. So then she decided to then put those figures in sequence, right? And so you see the reference here again to film. Film and filmic movement is going to come up again and again in terms of the various different focus that she has for her different bodies of work. And the one on the bottom, you can see it's the same figure, but then in different poses and put together. These are done as unique pieces, and as part of my talk, I'm going to later on then show the ones that are in public collections, and there is one here in Western New York. The next body of work is called A Play of Selves, and this was done in 1976. Here she would have been in her senior year. So The Play of Selves was a dramatic tale of jealousy, love, betrayal, attraction, and rejection. Here's a quote from Cindy. Quote, I was dealing with some personal issues with my boyfriend, and I came up with this idea to splinter myself into all these different characters. So A Play of Selves was done, and the amount of detail that Cindy did to create these, and the documentation and the preparation for it is just mind-boggling. These are all figures. There's 255 of them. This exhibition was put together and presented at Hallwalls in August of '76 as part of what was called the Open Space Exhibition series. So what she had to do was to photograph these individual characters, which were her. The ones that were male were photographed larger in scale, and then there were smaller ones that she could insert in and have it in the background. And so this piece was her first solo exhibition, at Hallwalls. So on the left-hand side, you see a picture of what it looked like when it was installed in the gallery. Does it have a pointer on it? And it does. Oh, it does. Okay, so what you're seeing, this again here is this is Act 2, and down here it's plans out all what's going to be on each wall, the characters. Okay, so there's a direct connection between, if you can find that piece there, is right there, and then this is Act 2, and so you can actually find it also. It's right there. Right, so it shows on what part of the wall that's going to go on. And here's the plan of the gallery down here, when Hallwalls was located on Essex Street. So the next cinematic piece that she did of the cutouts was called The Murder Mystery, and that was done in 1976. This one consisted of 80 scenes, 13 characters, and 255 cutouts. This is how she described the plot of this particular. The leading lady falls in love with her leading man, or at least they're having an affair, and her husband finds out. The leading man has a jealous wife, and she's sort of an alcoholic, and somebody murders the actress. So she showed this at Artist Space in New York. The relationship developed between Artist Space and Hallwalls, and so she was part of a 6-person show there of the Hallwalls artists. At that time it was Diane Bertola, Charlie Clough, Nancy Dwyer, Robert Longosin, Sherman, and Michael Zwack. So it was the 6 of them that showed at Artist Space. I showed this one because you get a sense of what she had to do and then to convert these into these scenes. So these were 8 by 10 photos. But what you're seeing there is the figure, 8 by 10 photo, and then cut out. And then these here and that over there. So this particular scene is scene 10, press A, interviews director, as press C and D photograph the actress. Okay? And all of these were spelled out in elaborate detail and precision, because of course they would have been, they had to be installed on the wall that way. And so here is Cindy Sherman here, and then Diane Bertola over here, installing that piece at Artist Space in New York City. So the body of work that followed directly after this, again, this is 1976, so she's still a senior at Buff State, was called the Bus Riders. This particular piece was created for SEPA Gallery, which sponsored something called the Photo Bus Exhibition in cooperation with the NFTA. What they did is they invited artists to create works that would then be installed up where you would normally see the advertisements at the top of the bus on both sides. So the concept that she had for this was to come up with an entire list of different characters of bus riders, and each had their own particular personality and characteristics, right? Quote, I was trying to make it seem like you were watching both sides of the bus, so as if the bus were transparent, you could only see the passengers. So these were some of the ones that were photographed, and she had an entire listing of both black and white, male and female, and of various ages. And in some instances in communication with each other, or shots so that they were going to be, so the one that was a young sleazy couple, tough looking girls, young punk, giggling, whispering teenage girls, which you see over here. Oops. So, over here, the teenage whispering girls there. Also, some of them were photographed from the back, because when they were installed in the bus, you would be looking through, so you would actually see the backs of some people's in the front. This is something that you would explore later. A quote that she said about this: the idea was partly making fun with a little bit of anger in there. So to get a sense of what that looked like in the bus, oh, well, I'll get to that page. That one next, because the Cover Girls was also included as part of that bus project. So Cover Girls was also exhibited in the SEPA Photo Bus exhibition. And for this, what she did is she used the cover of magazines, and she photographed them, but then what she did is she also photographed herself and inserted herself in the second and third photograph. So if you look, the first one you're seeing is the Vogue with that, is that Madonna? Might be. I don't know who that is. Anyway, so the second and third is Cindy, but what she's done is she's put herself up in makeup to look like that, but then she's also contorted it in some way or changed it. So you can see, for example, the Mademoiselle, the first one is the way it existed, then she's got herself looking as closer to that person, and the third one she sort of like pokes fun at it, does something else with it. Right? So these were, in this series, and here is where she says the idea was a parody, making fun with a little bit of anger in there. So that's about the CoverGirl series. This is an idea that she would later explore, which basically was a result of her long time and continuing ambivalent relationship with the world of glamour. So this gives you a sense of what she had to do to plan for these. So these are all the characters that she's already worked out, okay? All here. This is the bus. These explain what all the characters are. She actually created more than she needed to be able to put in the space of the bus. And then the fashion ads I showed you were on both sides there. So what you're seeing there is the family circle. There's right across on the side there. So just go back, you can see, I'm sorry, go forward to this one here. This was a picture that was in the Courier Express there, Buffalo News, which shows Cindy, and it was a dual show. So Cindy was on one side and over here, so you can see the figures. And then the other side, this is Ellen Carey, and her photographs were on that side there. This is Bob Muffaletto, who was the founder of SEPA Gallery. And ironically, let's see, now I wasn't living there in '76, but it was the bus that went right in my neighborhood. So this was something very interesting. So as a result of organizing a show and working, co-curating with Michael Bean, the show for the Castellani Art Museum that was called West New York Collects, it's a series, and this particular one was Western New York Collects Cindy Sherman. So what we did is that as part of researching that, the archives for Hallwalls are held at the Poetry and Rare Book Room at UB. So we made an appointment with Jim Maynard to look at pieces from the archive, and he pulled out some things for us. And one of the things they pulled out was this particular piece of legal pad paper. And it said, filling all of Upton Hall's toilet paper holders with soft, perfumed, like Sherman colored, varied toilet paper. Each sheet of toilet paper will have been stamped with a rubber stamp. I will have made an imprint of my lips, blotted lipstick lips. The imprint will be a bright red stamp, dye, or real lipstick. Cindy Sherman. Similar to this. So we saw this, and we thought, and of course Michael, if you know Michael, he's just this ebullient, like, let's just do it attitude. He says, well, let's do it. I mean, we assumed that she didn't do this. We thought it was just a proposal. It's in Hallwalls archive material, just something and it turns out he said, why don't we ask her for her lip print? If she sends us her lip print, we can make toilet paper. Right? Like, okay, we're going to ask Cindy Sherman, can you send us your lip print? This is not going to sound weird. So we contacted her, and she said, yes, actually, I did do that project. It was called an art attack. Hallwalls had this thing that they would have artists would do something. It would be kind of guerrilla public art, right? So this is probably one of the earliest public art, an early public art by Cindy Sherman, right? And she said, yes, I did do it. And by the way, I have the stamp from 1975, 76. There's a particular dignity and beauty about these images. One of the things that's been said about these is that as she's older now, she's 64, 65, I think, and she's kind of embracing some of her own features and not changing them, but sort of using them as a vehicle. Quote, I relate so much to these women. They look like they've been through a lot, and they're survivors. And you see in some pain in there, but they're looking forward and moving on. Now, some of you may be aware that she is on Instagram, and that's something that is relatively recent. She joined Instagram in October of 2016, and I was going to Japan with a friend, and she was on Instagram. So I thought, I'll post from my trip, why not? At that point, the account was private, but whenever someone requested to follow me, I felt like it was my duty to see if they were really serious art-interested people. So I'd look up their Instagram and say, oh, okay, they look like they're creative enough. Some people would be posting a bunch of selfies in the mirror, so those people I reject. But I found it was taking too much time to researching who wants to follow me, so that's when I went public about 5 months into it. Her colorist introduced her to Facetune, and so she downloaded the app, and that's what she's been using to create. This was one that she worked with W Magazine, and created that one that was part of the spread there. So you can see it's a mix of obviously, just something she's posted, but then some of these things that she's converted. And this one was actually her in the hospital, and she actually changed it and altered it. Okay, next portion I want to talk about are works that are in the collections here in Western New York. Right? So there's a fair amount of representation between the Albright-Knox, Burchfield, Penney, and the Castellani, and the Ceramics Museum at Alfred. So I'm going to go through these. And you're going to start to see connections between pieces that you've already seen and ones that refer back to that. So the Albright has this one here, which again predates when they were called Untitled. It's called Magic Time, and it was from 1975, and it was printed in 2014, an edition of 20. But you can see where it was one of these in here. So she went back to earlier work and then would select and then selectively print editions. This one is in two collections, public collections. It's called Farmer's Daughter. It's from 1975, and it was done in an edition of, printed in 2014 edition of the 125. So the ones that she had done, the film stills, editions of 10, later ones, on occasion, she would do a series of 75, 100, or 125 editions. This is owned, again, we're at the Albright. They have a set of 20 of the Bus Rider ones that they purchased after the show was done, the Wish You Were Here, Buffalo and the Avant-Garde of the 1970s. These are in edition of, they're 8x10s, and they're in edition of 125. There's a set of 20 of them. The Albright only owns one of the film stills. It's this particular one that was donated by Steve Biltikoff, and this is film still number 29. You probably can tell that would have been done in her apartment building in New York City. Once you start to see them, you can. This is Untitled Doctor and Nurse. It's from 1980. However, if there's a second date on it, that means it's from 87. It was printed in 87, an edition of 125. They own one of the rear screen projection pieces, and this is from 1980, just an edition of 5. This is one of the centerfolds, the one that was the Art Forum commission, which is about 2 feet by 4 feet, this particular one, and that was only done in an edition of 10. Now, because they're not about particular people, per se, sometimes people will describe who it looks like, and so this one has been parenthetically referred to as Marilyn. And this one was done in an edition of 125, it's from 1982. So this is Cindy in her studio. This was her, you can see some of the props, some of her setup, part of, the prosthetics, all kinds of other. This was done for the cover of Art News in 1983, but published as an edition of 125 at that time. And then the most recent one that the Albright has is this one here, which is from that series, the fashion series, and it's done in the year 2000, and it's edition of 6. So that's in total what the Albright has. Okay. The Burchfield Penney has a number of pieces as well, starting with this particular one here. So you see this is one of the ones that was from the ABCDE, Untitled, this is Untitled D, and it's from 1975, and you can see where it fits in with the sequence. This one here has been called, the sequence has been called Growing Up, because you see her from a little girl, and as she's gradually getting older and older, you can see in that transition from back. So here you can see that it was done as an accordion fold. But again, this one was printed as an edition later on. The Burchfield has two film stills, which they had gotten through an NEA grant. This particular one here, which is in actually guest room, which would have been in the Longo family home in Los Angeles. And the second one they have is this one here. This is one of the earlier ones. You can see it has that kind of graininess to it. This one is from 2010. I'm sorry, this is 1983. This comes from that fashion series, referred to as the American Girl. And again, as far as a fashion model, you know, there are certain things that are wrong there. The expression is wrong. It's not cropped. That's exactly the way that it's presented, which again is part of her head is chopped off, but that's where the print is, and you certainly would never, you know, do that in a full fashion image one. And it does have this kind of like all-American Girl kind of like quality to it. This is the most recent one that the Burchfield has. This one was a gift from Cindy Sherman on the occasion of the Burchfield's 50th anniversary. They did a show called 50 at 50, and it was approaching different artists, major artists, if they would donate something for the collection. And this is done in 2010, 2012. What's unique about this one is that it was a collaboration with a cosmetics company, MAC. So Sherman used their line of cosmetics, and then they created it as a set that had the different cosmetics that would be used to actually get that effect. In case you want to do it like that. You know, just FYI. So the Castellani Art Museum. Have you ever heard of the Castellani? It's this little place. It's really far away. It's like, I think you have to get a visa to get there. You cross at least 7 bridges or something. I'm not sure. So the Castellani collection has actually a very rare piece. Well, this one you've seen, the Albright has the same ones. The Farmer's Daughter from '75. However, what they have is this one here, which is a unique print. It's the fairies. It's referred to as Scale Relationship Series version 3. This is from 1976. And again, because it's unique work, it's not a print, and those are all hand cut out. They're very small, they're only about that tall, and it's actually reproduced a lot in research. This one's a promised gift. This is called Under the WTC. So the story behind this one is that on the right here is the film still, one of the film stills that she did. This is the World Trade Center. When 9/11 happened, she went back to her negatives and her contact sheets and found another one. So here she's walking away from the camera. She found this one, she's walking toward the camera. Now the girl just arrived in New York City, ready to go, fresh face, new face in town. And so she printed an edition of 100 of these. This actually was sold, it's right over here. This one was sold through the Lucille Ball auction. And so I brought a few things you're going to see, the plates from but that one's this one here. This is in the Castellani collection. It's Doctor and Nurse, this is an edition of. Actually, it's not known what the number of the edition is. It was from 1980, but then printed in 1992. I point this out because there's actually 3 different versions of Doctor and Nurse. So the first version is here. Second version here is the ovals, and then the third one is down here. Again, where she's by what she's doing, her pose. The garments obviously facing the camera, confronting the camera, man in charge, right? And here, demure, you can see, again, a lot is being expressed in how she's conveying whatever the personality is that she's showing. This one is also a promised gift to the Castellani. It is called Reading. It's part of the fairy tale series, and it was done in 1985. I think this is an edition of 125. This is a very large piece. It's 60 inches by 90 inches. This is from the Disaster series. It's made in 1986, and it was an edition of 6. So you can see, just imagine the size. Well, let's see, would that be about the size that's on the screen?
A little bigger.
It's a little bit bigger than that? Okay. It's pretty engrossing. It's gross and engrossing. Now there again, I think people looking at it think like, well, where is, is this Cindy here? Theoretically it might be, or it could be a prosthetic, But it doesn't kind of reveal itself until you sort of, also she's using this very contrasty lighting. So the Alfred Ceramic Museum, the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum at Alfred University has this set of they have the pink one. So this is the set of that Limoges china, and here I'm showing you the other ones. It comes in the green, the apple green, the royal blue, and also in yellow. I think the blue is sold out, but the other ones I think are good. So I'm going to show you also the last part are private collections in Western New York. Part of what the one show that I organized that was at the Castellani and actually the Burchfield was borrowing and using works from public and private collections. Okay. So this piece belongs to Jack Edson. In some instances, I can say what it is because it's already been identified. This is very early. This was part of an exhibition that was done at UB at Gallery 219, and it was called Multiples. And what was in the exhibition was works that were just in editions of 20. So this is a photostatic print of a National Geographic picture that Cindy cut out the garments on these young monks and then made photocopies of it. So very unusual, interesting piece outside of the canon. This one here is Cindy as Lucille Ball. So there was a photo booth in Michael's Wax studio. And what would happen is the artist would get, Cindy would get dressed up. She'd get dressed up out to go to a party or opening or whatever. And she comes out and she's dressed up like this. And you should go and you should get a picture of that. You should document that. And so that was taken inside one of the photo booths. In the photo booth, rather. This is one that was part of a series of a progression of images. And there's the progression. So you can see where that one fits in. And what is it here? I guess it's here. Yeah. Okay. This was in the show that I mentioned at SEPA called 5 Photographers. And this is from the archives at, and this is the same. This also is the another one that's from that series. So this one is often referred to as the Madonna. And here you can see the sequence where that fits in. So this is the original, what they were, the size, and then an addition was made of them. This is kind of an unusual piece. This is also a photostatic print. This is called the Letraset art sheet, and it's 1 and 2. So they're both in the collection of the Poetry Premier Bookroom collection, but this one's in, this one I own on the left-hand side, and it was my first Cindy Sherman that I got, and it was a raffle item. When Hallwalls had their 20th anniversary, the after party was at Big Orbit, and they gave from Hallwalls, they gave a few things to be raffled off. So I got raffle tickets, and that's what I was able to get. So what it is that it's a photostatic print, but it's images that she's taken from different, and it was interesting to research to find out where these came from. So this was clip art. So what she's got over here, and this is 1975, she's a junior at Upstate. She's taken different personas of women as mothers, as secretaries, as business, shopping, in the office, etc. Different, and then these are cut out and then created into that. And it's interesting because when I saw these, I thought, well, these are from 1966. It's like, wow, that's a long time ago. Well, it was in 66, and she was doing it in 75, so it really wasn't that old. I mean, it wasn't vintage really at that point, but now it seems vintage. This is Cindy at Artist Space. So when she went to New York, she actually was hired as the secretary, got a job as a secretary part-time at Artist Space, and she would come dressed up in different guises and costumes. And so this is her dressed up as a secretary. And so Helen Weiner, the director at the time, photographed her. This is a film still that's in a private collection, and we borrowed it, I'm assuming it's still in the person's collection. We borrowed it for the Burchfield show, and they had it in a safety deposit box. because the film stills actually now go for $200,000 to $300,000. And so this, again, is one of those that has that kind of film noir quality to it. This one's called The Ancestor. This was a commission from the Jewish Museum, and this was done as an edition of 72, which is kind of odd, and it was done in 1985. So you can see, in some instances, this one sort of relates and connects to the history portraits, and a little bit of the fairy tale ones in there. This is that pig woman I talked about. That's from the fairy tale series. That's an edition of 75. And this is called In My Garden. It's from 1987, an edition of 125. And that's the second one. The second one that I brought in is the one that's the one that's called In My Garden. That one there. And so that's squarely within like the fairy tale series. This is Untitled. They're all Untitled. Baby Doll with Mask. It's from 1987. An interesting story about this is that what you see on the left is Cindy's photograph, and you see on the right is a punk rock band's album. It was called Painkillers, and the band was called Babes in Toyland. They were based in Minneapolis, but they performed in New York. They became friends with Cindy. She went to their concerts, and then she invited them up to her studio, and they selected some of her images to then use on the cover of these. So this isn't faded. That's actually the way that particular one was intentionally, because it was done and sold as an edition. But that's the one that they used for the cover of the album. Again, here Cindy doesn't appear at all. This is called Mask on Doll. This is an edition of 25. This is an artist proof for 15, and this came out of a Hallwalls auction. That's the plate, but I'm not quite sure why the image is from the terrain. But I did refer to the fish in the fleur-de-lis because of the fish out there. This is Cindy as Mrs. Claus, the day after Christmas. Now, what's interesting to me about this was actually commissioned by the New York Times Magazine for the cover, and she must have done several different versions, which they offered to them. So this is what they put on the cover. You see, she's kind of sanitized there, right? But this is the one that Cindy did as a multiple edition. Now, which was a really wonderful gesture on her part. When this was published, this one here, her dealer, Metro Pictures, allowed people to purchase signed but unnumbered editions of this for $100. This is back in the 90s. This particular one was 1990. And so, but I think it's interesting how this looks. I mean, obviously the differences there and there. This one is rather unusual. This one was done for a print for the Art Pro Choice 2 portfolio. That was actually part of a portfolio that also included a number of different artists. I don't have them all listed, but you can see some of these pieces down there. It's a little bit different. This is a group of 8 of them. This particular one was from when they narrowed it down to the second edition of those group of 4. Are you getting the sense that there's like way too much information I know about the German things? But hopefully what you're seeing are some things that are not familiar to you at all. It's new work. This one here, Woman in Sundress, 2000. Printed edition of 350, and it was printed in conjunction with the show that she had an exhibition, a solo exhibition at the Serpentine Gallery in Kensington Park in London. And this one came through a Lucille Ball auction. I didn't get it. I was what they call the back bidder. But we did borrow it back. This is the last one I'm going to show you from the. And you can see we actually ones that I've shown you. We actually borrowed the show that was at the Castellani. We've got, Michael has brought in other editions, other images of these, other copies of the brochure rather. Pregnant Cindy, Pregnant Woman rather, 2000 and 2004. This was printed as a fundraising premium for Planned Parenthood, an edition of 300. So if you sent them in a donation, at the time it was $1,000, then you would get one of these prints, and it was an edition of 300. That's funny, because I used this, and when I had students, I asked them, I said, where do you think she lives? Someone, In a trailer park? So why do you say that? Why do you think that? But again, it's all part of what she's doing. It's a persona. You're reading into that. You're getting a sense of the person's backstory, who they are, what their voice would sound like if they spoke, what has happened before this picture, what's going to happen afterwards, who are the people that she's associated with, is she married, does she have children, etc. All right, let's see. So the last thing I have is a surprise. So you know how Oprah Winfrey says, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. Okay, so we're doing that version of it. You get a Cindy Sherman, and you get a Cindy Sherman, and you get a Cindy Sherman. So courtesy of Michael Beam at the Castellani Art Museum, what he's done is he has put together, you've seen the toilet paper, right? So if you weren't in the bathroom at the Castellani, you didn't get a piece of the toilet paper. So what Michael has is a limited edition piece of the toilet paper, identified where it came from, and then the story about it on the backside. So there are enough of these for everybody to have one. That's again courtesy of Michael Beam. So I might thank you, Michael. So that's the end of my, wow, you're very patient. I guess, should I ask if there's any questions? It's a lot of information.
Your plate over here, is that microwave and dishwasher?
It probably is. I mean, it's not, it's sort of Limoges. I mean, I don't use it that way, but.
It's not metal, it's not like.
No, you can't, because it has, it probably has some metal.
My other quick question, Jared, what's the highest price that was ever paid for one of your works?
I believe it's 2.9 million, and I think it was that one, but it could be more in the neighborhood of 3 million. Yeah, and that was the one that was in 2012. So at that point, it was the highest that went for a photograph. Period. I think that's been exceeded since. Mm-hmm. But she's really kind of on par with Richard Prince and others when photographs go. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
I just have to ask you this question because it's something that I'm very curious of. Did she ever participate in Art Park?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. I haven't come across anything that refers to that. Although, of course, they would have been aware of Art Park, and I'm not sure. I'm not aware of, and I haven't seen. There wasn't an exhibition or anything. It doesn't appear on her. I'm not absolutely sure of that. I'm not absolutely sure.
Jerry, two questions. So one, why was she drawn to work in series as much as she was at Part A and Part B? How did she actually self-portrait? Was it from stepping on that, and was it timing? What was the mode?
Well, in terms of series like that I just shown on grouping, well, that is if you look at the work, for example, of, I'll just use John Fall as an example. The photographers are always kind of changing and moving into a different, they mind an idea and then they kind of move on. So working in series, as a photographer, and also put Peter Stevenson to that. You can look at a whole range of his work, and he's worked in series, and it's been changed over time. So that's something that artists would generally do. So I would say that is not unique to Cindy Sherman. And the second part was.
Was she using a timer when she took self-portraits?
Some of them were a timer. In some cases, you can actually see that she did use a shutter release. But generally, it was a timer, and she would actually be set up. And then that's why you got them all, and then she would just go into a different pose, but she pretty much exclusively just didn't want to work with anybody else. She just really did her own thing. It's just the film stills, the ones that were done that were taken by somebody else because they were on location.
I guess I want to ask my question more intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
When she took, I understand about artists doing series. Why was she so drawn to doing series of different archetypes and people? Did she ever talk about that?
If I'm, kind of my own opinion on it is that was a particular fascination that she had about personalities and feelings, and I think in a way that she was able to express something that was more universal, because that's something that could be, people could have an affinity or an appreciation of. Why these personas? Why keep changing and doing the personas? You know, I think she initially, you know, started doing them as but then just basically kind of developed and changed and enhanced it. And it became, I think at a certain point it became a hallmark of what she was doing. And she did divert from it. I mean, and we could call the ones, you know, the sex pictures, for example, they're figurative, but they were still life, right? I mean, so she did kind of step away from some of those. Yeah, I don't know if that completely answers the question.
I know that, you know, her collection of what she puts in the studio is supposed to be, you know, amazing. Has she ever, I mean, I know she, for many years, she did her own makeup, she did everything.
Right, yeah.
Is that still?
The only thing that I've come across, she does now have someone that helps her with the wigs. She doesn't have assistants and people that work with her. Some of the, you know, and she's, I mean, again, even in terms of the digital work, before she's doing that herself, you know. So no, she doesn't have like a large setup, and she's in where she lives in New York. One floor of the unit is her living quarters, and the other part is her studio. So, and she's got racks and racks of all kinds of other
What
stuff.
area in New York?
In Tribeca. Yeah.
I was wondering, she takes all these photos of herself. Does she have a way of seeing them while they're being done so she can know, is this what I want? Otherwise, she would take many, many, many of them.
Well, in the early stages, she would use Polaroids.
Okay.
So normally someone would do it and they'd get it set up and then do a Polaroid before they actually use the film, you know, the film. You know, she's doing contact sheets, or when she was doing the early one using film. She's now doing digital. So in terms of digital photography, yeah, they can actually see it and decide to save and come back. And again, she's setting it up and also understanding what's going to be in the frame, you know, that I'm going to get into the frame and I'm going to, you know, take it and then, you know, and testing. The reason why you saw that head on the stand in there is because she uses that as a stand-in. So if she puts that in the frame, she can get a sense like that's my height, that's where my head's going to be, and that's what the lighting is going to look like. And so that thing that you just saw with the head on it, that's going to move that way.
I'm just wondering, like, when she, like, at a certain point in time, she took this photo, does she have some kind of mirror and outside the thing so she can see what she's doing at that moment?
I've seen some pictures of the studio where there is a mirror in there, but that wouldn't give her the view that the camera is in, per se. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I know that MoMA did a massive show of her work. Is the ATG planning on it?
You know, it's interesting, not that I'm aware of. And actually, in terms of the closest a retrospective of her work came was Toronto. That was part of a tour that went to a number of cities, including LA. Yes, there was a show at MoMA in 2012, and then the one that just, I don't think it's still up, was at the National Gallery in London. Yeah, but you kind of would think that would be, you know, kind of appropriate, or that would happen at some point. I mean, they certainly at some point could have actually taken that tour when it came through. I don't know if that may actually happen with the new bills.